So in this video, we're just going to be creating a very basic email login system, a very generic login system with an email and a password for a Chrome extension. We're going to be using NodeJS and Express to create a server on the back end, and of course the front end is going to be JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. So I'm going to show you how it works. So we click on the extension icon. We're greeted with a sign-in form. We enter our credentials. It goes to the back end. The back end validates it, and then we just flip to a sign-out page like this. And then we click sign out and we flip back to the sign in page. Let me sign in once more. So we've added this. So 1, 2, 3. Instead of clicking the sign out, I'm going to close down the browser. So Alt F4, Alt F4. Let's restart the browser. Let's click on the extension icon and we're greeted with a welcome back message. So in addition to a basic sort of sign in, login, log out system, we have the ability to create a return session, or just have the browser remember us if we didn't click the sign out. So click the sign out and we're just put back to the sign in page. So again, a very basic email login system on the back end. We're not going to be doing any sort of database work. I've made it database agnostic. You can use MongoDB, SQL, whatever you want on the back end. We won't be doing any of that in this video, just the REST server and of course the front end Chrome extension. So if this interests you at all, stick around. Let's begin. All right, so let's start by creating the server, and then we'll move on to the Chrome extension. So let's just do an npm init-y in our console. Okay, let's start with the server here. Actually, we have to install the server first. npm iExpress. All right, so let's create that file. We'll call it app.js. We'll require or import the Express package or module. So require Express. Let's do a const app is equal to Express constructor. Let's establish a port. So it's going to be equal to process.env.port or 3000. Pick whatever port you want. Let's start with, we're going to do two routes, one to log in, one to log out, and then we'll do a general 404 route and then an error handler route. So let's do an app.get, more space there. It's going to be the login route. We're going to need the request response arrow function. There we go. And we'll just do a general res status 200 and send back nothing. We'll just do an end. We'll copy and paste this guy. Paste there. This will be the log out. GOUT. Same thing. 200 and end. And then we'll do a general 404. So use. We'll do request, response, and next. We'll do a res.status 404. And we'll do a send. We'll send route not found. And then finally we'll copy this, paste this down here. This will be our error handler. All we'll do is a res.status of error.status. If there isn't one, we'll just do a general 500. And then we'll send a message back, error.message. If there's no message, we'll just say, problem. All right, start the server. So const server is equal to app.listen on that port. We get a callback. We'll just do an empty function like this. The console.log of server is up and running on port space, and we'll do server.address, which is a function.port. All right, let's go to the package JSON. It's going to be not index, it's going to be app.js, and we're going to use Nodemon. If you don't know what Nodemon is, instead of starting the file with node and then the file name, if you start it with Nodemon, it updates your files in real time. So if we modify the app.js and we hit Control S, it'll automatically refresh the server. So for this, we need a command called start, and we're just going to say node app.js, save. Why is there an error here? All right, start the server, see if we got it working. Nodemon. There you go. Server's up and running on port 3000. So let's go over to the Chrome extension. I'll show you guys what we're working with there. So I'm just going to walk you through what we have on the Chrome extension. If you don't know what a Chrome extension is, I'll have a link in the description below or a card on the top right. It's a video I did. It'll walk you through how a Chrome extension works. And so this is the manifest. Let's just fill out the name. Let me just say, what are we doing? A basic email login system. Description, testing, basic email login system. Version 1 of it, manifest 2. I just have some default icons. The background script we're going to be using for this one. The options page is here. We're not going to be using this, but I'll just keep it there anyway. The browser action, we're not going to be using the pop-up. We're actually going to be popping up a completely different window for this. And I'll show you what the HTML is for that, for this Chrome extension, so we don't need to define a default pop-up property. Permissions, we're going to need the storage. We're going to be storing the user's credentials on the local storage, the local hard drive. So if they close their browser and they're still signed in, they open their browser and they click on our extension icon, they'll be greeted with a welcome message instead of a sign in or a sign out message. And of course, we need the server that we're going to ping, that server that we created in the intro. It's localhost 3000. Whatever you run your server on, just change the port. If you're going to use this on a real-life production, of course, it wouldn't be localhost, it'd just be the domain you're actually using. So that's the background, or excuse me, the manifest.json. Let's move on to the background.js. We just have a listener. We're going to fill out all this in the video. We have a pop-in script. Let me show you the HTML first. Let's do this. Pop in. We have a sign-in page. We have a sign-out page, and we have a welcome back page. Don't be too intimidated by, these are the scripts, never mind. I didn't want those. Let's close this. Yeah, so don't be too intimidated by the code for, I'll show you guys that later. So we have sign in, sign out, and a welcome back by all of this code. This is not necessary for a basic email login system. It's just to animate and make the design more palatable for a video. So all this stuff just animates and you'll see it in a second. The meat of it is this. We have a form. They fill out an email password, and we've attached a script, and all that script does, what it's going to do is when you click that button, all of this is unnecessary for the basic email login system. It's just to pretty up the UI. So when they click the submit button, we'll send all that data back to the background script. So again, don't be too intimidated by all this stuff here. It's completely unnecessary. So these are the pages where we produced. When we click or hover over the sign in, we get this effect. We click the sign in and we don't have any sort of properties there. We give them some feedback as to what they need to do. This is the sign out, and this is the welcome back. There's a span right here that will fill in with a name, but for now there's no name, so it just says welcome back blank. Of course, sign out. So those are 3 pages we're going to be working with on the front end. These are their accompanying scripts. Let me do this. Close this, close this. That's the sign out script. This is the sign in script. Again, all this is just to make the buttons enlarge and change the background color, all that stuff. We're just concerned with this part right here. If they fill out an email and password, we're going to send message to backend or background script with email and password. For the sign out, we're going to send a message to background telling background to delete their credentials. And for the welcome back script, when they click the sign out, it's going to do the exact same here. So we can copy this, welcome back, paste this here. And so when they click the sign out button on the welcome back page, it'll sign them out as well. So those are the pop-up scripts that we're going to be using to let the user interact with their email and password and all the credential stuff. So how about we do this? How about we do a basic, we'll go through the basic logic flow of this Chrome extension. So we need the background.js open. I'll need the pop in, the sign in script, the sign out script, and the welcome back script. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to have the listener. We'll do an if tree right here. So if request.message, 2 S's, there we go, is equal to, and we'll have a login, then we'll do something. Else if request.message is equal to logout, we'll do something here. And finally, we'll need a third conditional message, and we need to know the user status. You'll see why later on in the video. Then we'll do something here. So let's go with the pop-in script. When they get the email and password, we'll send a message to the back end. So chrome.runtime.send message, and we'll send a message of login. Login, we'll get a function response, and we're expecting a response of success. So if the response is equal to the word success, CCESS, then we'll do something. For now, just console log. No, I shouldn't do that. Let's do sign in success. All right, let's go to the sign out script. So same thing. If they click the sign out button, we'll do a message to the back end. So runtime.send message. This time the message will be log out. We'll get a function response, and that response we expect to be the word success. So if response is equal to the word success, SUCCESS, then we'll just console.log sign out success. And the welcome page does the exact same thing, so we'll just copy this. So copy that, we'll go back here, paste that here, and this will be the logout as well, function response, sign out success, perfect. So we can close this, close this, close this, and we'll keep this open. So let's do this. Let's work on the login and the log out functionality, and then we'll do the user status stuff later. So let's get a variable going to keep track of whether or not they're logged in. So user signed in is equal to false. So let's create one function, two or one. Let's create one function like this. We'll do a function flip user status. If we provided we'll do this, user sign in variable. If it's true, we'll sign them in, so they want to be signed in. If it's false, they want to be signed out. So sign in, and then we need some user info. That'll be the email and the password. So we're going to say is if the sign in is true, we are going to fetch the, the local host 3000/login route. So we're going to sign the user in, essentially. Else if, we really don't need the else, but I'm just going to do this. Else if not sign in, we know they want to sign out. So we're going to fetch the local host 3000/logout route. Logout route. There we go. And so let's return, for this flip user status, let's return a promise. So we should have something like this in our login when we want to call this function. We're going to say flip user status, it returns a promise. So we're going to say true for sign them in, and then the user info is going to be in a request.payload, which I need to fill out right now. Payload, and we'll do a .then, we'll do a response. We'll just console.log the response for now. That comes back from our REST API that we made earlier in the video, and we'll just do .catch. Error, console.log the error. So I need a payload coming with the email and password from the sign in script right here. So it's not simply just going to be the message.login. It's going to have a payload, and that payload is going to be the email and password right here. So we'll do an object of email and pass. There we go. So we send the email pass object to this guy. That's the user info. So let's fetch the, so again, remember, for this function, it returns a promise. We're expecting to return a promise here. So we're going to fetch, and fetch is a promise. So we can return fetch. So let's fetch the http //localhost 3000/login route. And this is how we're going to pass the credentials. There are many ways. We could do something like this, where we pass the username in the URL and the password in the URL. Don't ever pass the password unencrypted in the URL. If you're going to do that, you need to encrypt the password first. We're not going to do that for this. We can send it in the body of our fetch request like this. We'll do some parameters like this. We'll do a method. We'll be explicit here. Method get. We're going to need some headers. I'll show you what in a second. We can do something like this. Body is equal to json.stringify of the user info. We won't do that either. We're going to pass the email and password through a header called authorization. So authorization, and the format for this is going to be basic. So you need this basic space, and you need to add this right here. It's going to look like this. Let's just say my email is t@yeah.com. There's going to be a colon, and then it's going to be the password. Let's say my password is 123. So it's going to be this string, and then we need to encode it in a 64-bit encoding, not encrypting, encoding. So we're going to use a function to encode this whole string, the t@yeah plus the colon plus the 123, in a 64-bit encode, because the authorization header expects a 64-bit encode. So we'll do something like this. It's going to be BTOA, that's the function, binary to ASCII, I think it's called. Yeah, binary to ASCII. And it's going to expect the string, this. So user info dot email, that colon I showed you, and then user info dot pass. And let me show you this. When we sign in, let me just show you what it actually looks like. BTOA console.log this guy. And we won't be doing this right now. Actually, I don't need to do that. I can just do it here. All right, check this out. So we'll let x equal, what did I say it was, t@yeah.com colon password 123. Let's do a BTOA of the x. And so this translates, encodes this string here into this set of characters here. Now again, this is not encryption, it's just encoding. This is, I think, cheaper on the cheaper to send than this guy right here. Also, if anyone's snooping in, you're not sending your text in plain, your password in plain text. So that's all we're doing. We're just converting this guy right here into this string right here. We send this to the back end, and the back end's going to decode. Well, they do it on their own. It decodes this string into this the initial string like that. So let me close this. I can uncomment these. There we go. What is this? Return fetch localhost. I don't know what that is. All right. So returning a promise. We're sending the authorization header to the back end. Fetch, and we'll do a then. We'll get a response. And so we'll check that the response is a 200. Let me just write the catch very quickly. Catch error, and we'll do a console.log the error. All right. Here's where things get a bit tricky. When we get the response, if the response is not equal to 200, we're just going to throw an error. So if the response is not equal to 200, we're just going to return, return fail. There you go. And so if it doesn't fail, we know they've successfully logged in from the back end. They have the proper credentials. We now need to save those credentials on the local storage with chrome.storage.local.set, and we're going to use key value pairs. We're going to save the user status. So let's do this. We know they signed in successfully. So we'll do a user signed in. We'll flip that to true. And then we'll just do a user status is equal to that user signed in. And then we want to save the user info under user info. And we get a function back if there should be an L here. If we successfully written to the hard drive, we get a function back with what we writ. So we'll just do response. And remember, this whole thing expects us to return a promise. So when we're in the fetch call, this second then, we need to return a promise as well, so the fetch can return a promise. Now, it's difficult because this chrome.storage local set, it's asynchronous, but it doesn't return anything. So if you did return like this, we couldn't return in the actual function here. We couldn't return a success or a fail. So we need to wrap this whole thing in another promise so we can do that. So it's going to look like this. We're going to return a new promise. We're going to take the resolve object, like this. And we're just going to wrap everything we do in here in this promise, and we return this promise. So now when we return things within a promise, we don't return, we resolve. So we can delete this line, we'll say resolve fail. User signed in. If they didn't successfully write to the hard drive, we get a Chrome error. So if chrome.runtime.last error, we know we failed writing to the hard drive. So we'll just do another resolve of fail. If we successfully signed in, we can do a resolve of success. And so this guy right here needs to be in here as well. And so we'll change this guy to just be the sign in parameter or argument passed in, which would be true or false. So sign in. So let's go over what we just did. So we've written a function that flips the user status. If the sign in is true, we sign them in. So remember, this function here is going to return a promise because we expect a promise. The string of then and catches, that's a promise. So we return the fetch call to our server API that we wrote. It's still up and running, port 3000, the login. Let me do this. Can I get the app.js? So we're going to hit this this route right here. We're going to write a function that actually authenticates the user in a second, but not right now. So we hit the localhost 3000 login with a method of get. We send the email and the password through the authorization header. We're going to parse that in the back end. If the response is not 200, which means it's failed, we resolve a fail. If not, we know we've successfully passed the backend test. We now need to save that status on the local hard drive with Chrome storage local set. We save the user status, which is going to be true or false. In this case, it's going to be a true. We save the email and the password. For this video, this user info, we're saving the email and the password nakedly on the hard drive. Don't do that in production. If you want to save the password, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to save the password on the hard drive or in a cookie, you need to hash it or encrypt it and then save it. But for this video, I'm not going to go through that, but do not do that in real life. We're saving the password in plain text on the hard drive. Do not do that. And so we save on the hard drive, we get a response. If there is an error doing the whole writing to the hard drive thing, we resolve a fail. If not, the user has successfully signed in, so we change the variable to true, and we resolve with a success. And so that's what this guy expects here. So whatever whether it's success or fail, we're just going to return that. So we're just going to do what's going to be a send response of the response right here. Again, that's going to be a fail or a success. We don't need that semicolon. And in this thing, we need to return a true, which keeps the message line open between the pop-in script and the background script. Because when the pop-in script sends their message to the backend, all of this stuff is asynchronous. So who knows when it's going to finish. In order to keep the message line open, we return true. And then when we're finished with the message line, we use a send response to kind of to send the final response and close the message line. So that's the sign in process. The sign out process is a bit different in that we don't want to fetch right away. We want to make sure that the user signing out is the actual user logged in. So we need to do a chrome.storage.local.get, and we're going to get an array of items. We need the user status, and we need the user info _info. We'll do a function. We get the response, which is going to be an object with those items in there. All right, so we're going to know if chrome.runtime.last error, we know we've failed. So we're just going to return a fail. And just like we resolved earlier, we'll do that in a bit. So return fail. If there's no error getting the stuff, we still need to check that there actually is an entry there. So we'll say if, we'll do a response.userStatus is equal to undefined. So it's neither true nor false. And this comes into play when we do if they close the browser and they open it, we need to check whether or not there's an actual user status. The three options are true, false, and undefined. So if it's undefined, we also return a fail. But if there's no error and there's actually a true or false, and we're expecting a false because we've already signed in, then we're going to sign the user out with the fetch. So we can just copy this guy right here. Actually, let's write it out line by line just to give you guys practice into the logic flow here. So we're just going to fetch the http://localhost 3000. Let me move up. The route we're going to fetch is the log out route, and we have the method of get as well. So method get, we have a headers, and we're going to copy that line. I want to write that line. So same thing. We're sending the credentials back to the back end. If they pass the credential test, then we'll sign them out. So userinfo.email, this should be response.useremail. Response.useremail, and then response here as well. Response.userinfo.pass. So we have the fetch call. We'll do a .then. Let's throw this on this line here. It's going to give us a response. Let me just do a catch real quick. .catch. Can I write there? Catch. Let's do a console.log of the error and the response. So if the response is not 200, then we'll just return a fail. Else we know they're permitted or allowed to sign themselves out. So to do that, we'll just log them out or change the status within the local storage. So we're just going to do storage.local.set. We'll set the user status to false. We don't really need to do that. We know it's going to be false when it comes in, so we'll just user status is the sign in. And we'll just empty the user info. So user, to say user underscore info, just to keep it consistent, yeah. Just an empty object. Just because we say false here, if we didn't empty out the user info, the old email and password would still be here. You want to clear it, so just an empty object. And of course, this gives a function. Let's say response. What am I doing here? There we go. Let me scroll up, need space. Response, if there's an error, so if chrome.runtime.last error, we'll return a fail. If there's no error, we know we successfully flipped the user status in the storage. So we'll just say user signed in is now equal to false. Don't really need to, we'll just do the sign in like this. Did I do that up here? We can just do sign in like this. Sign in status. And we return a success. Now, remember this function is supposed to return a promise, but this part of our tree didn't start with the fetch. The fetch is a promise. Chrome storage local get is not a promise. So to return an actual promise, we need to wrap this guy. So we're going to return a new promise. We need the resolve object. You can put all of these guys in the new promise. What was that CH for? That was Chrome right here. CH. And instead of returns, we just use the resolve object. So resolve fail. This is also resolve fail. Resolve fail. Anything else resolve? This one should be resolve fail as well. And this should be a resolve fail as well. And this should be a resolve of success. So resolve SUCCESS. So just to go through what we did, when they call this function and the sign in is false, that means they want to sign out. So this is the branch that handles the sign out. We return a promise because this function is expected to return a promise. So we do a new promise, we get the resolve object, we open up the Chrome local storage to see if the user has the proper credentials. We'll send that to the back end. So we get the user status, user info. If there's an error getting this stuff, we send back fail. If the status is undefined, so it's neither true nor false, we send back a fail. Else, we know it's a true or a false. We fetch to the logout URI or route on the back end. Method get, we send the authorization with the user email and user password. The back end verifies if that user is actually on the system. If they are, it sends a 200. If they're not, it's not a 200. It's going to be maybe like a 400 or 500, whatever. It doesn't matter. If it's not 200, we resolve a fail. If it is 200, we know they have proper credentials. We open up the storage local.set. We set or flip the user status to false. We clear their user info. If there's an error doing that, this guy shouldn't be returned. This guy should be resolved. fail. And if there's no error, we know the whole process went off without a hitch. And so we user signed in to the sign in, which is going to be false, and we resolve with a success. So let's call that in here as well. Return true here, flip status here. There's going to be no payload for the logout. It'll get the user info and the email from the Chrome local storage. So we're just going to say true, and let's say null for this guy. Send response, which is going to be a success or fail to the front end, return true. User status we'll get to in a second. So let's go back over to the server, and we're going to write the function that authorizes, that checks their credentials. So it's going to be in the app.js. So write that piece of middleware here. We're going to say function authenticate underscore user, and we're going to need the request, response, and the next. And then we'll call that middleware right here. So when they ping the get login, we'll run our middleware, authenticate user. If they're authenticated, then they'll have access to the rest of the code here. So same thing here. We'll call the middleware here, authenticate user. There we go. We don't need it for this, and we don't need it for that. So why is it doing this? Request authenticate function, authenticate user. Oh, we don't need this. It's not an arrow function. And so we don't need this as well. We need there. Nope, we don't need this as well. There we go. All right, so let's write this function. Let's start with this. We need to take out the authorization header from the request. So let's say let creds equals what should be rec.get. We need the authorization header. And so this is going to return something like this, that basic, and then all that stuff with the email and password. We just want the email and password, this stuff here. We don't need the basic, and we don't need the space. So we can take that out by doing this. Creds is equal to creds.substring, creds.index of, we're going to go with the space. So we want the space plus, let me write that for you. So basic, space, and all that stuff. We want to start here at the J. So if we do index of space, it'll give us this one. We do +1, it'll start on the beginning of the string we want. So space, and then we'll do a +1. So that should rip out the email and the password from the credential, the authorization credential. We now need to convert it back to binary, or visually for us, ASCII. So we'll do that with this. Creds is equal to buffer.from. Creds, we start with a base 64, and we cast that to string to binary. So that should give us this, depending on what we have at the back end, sa.com, and that'll be the colon and then the password. We want to split this up. We want the email and the password separate. So we'll just do creds is equal to creds.split, and we'll split the string by the colon, and this will finally give us an array that has the s at yeah stuff, and then it has the password here. So we've gone from, here's a string, 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 we split, now we get an array. Now here is where you do a database check. We're not going to get into that in the video. It'd be way too long, and depending on what database you want to do, MongoDB, SQL, I'll leave that to you. But let me just write a note here. So database check of credentials. We're just going to simulate that by doing this. If creds, and we'll do a 0, and we'll just do that t at yeah. So t at yeah.com. There we go. And we'll do an and here. Creds, so the password, we'll just do 123 is equal to string 123. Then we know for a mock example, we've pinged the database said, yeah, there's a record here, so the person's authorized. So we'll just do this. We'll do a res.status of 200, success code, and we'll just do an end like that. Else, if it's not there, we'll just do a res.status.401, which is unauthorized, and we'll do an end like that. And actually, this is unneeded because we have the res.status. So if they're fully authorized, we'll just push to the next piece of middleware, which is going to be this line right here. So to push over to the next piece, we'll just do a next like that. So this next will go down to here, and then we'll send the res.status 200 end stuff. So that looks good. Let me just go over this. Authenticate user, rec res next, rip it out of the authorization header, take the email and password out of the header. We convert the email and password to binary, ASCII for our eyes. We split between the email and the password. We do our faux database check. If the email's t@yeah.com and the password, there should be a 1. If the password is 123, then they've passed. So res.status 200n. If not, we're just going to send them a 401 on authorized and end the communication. So we'll save that. Let me just go through all this. Does it look proper? That looks proper. All right, let's go back to the Chrome extension. So now that we have this, we wrote a lot of code about testing anything. We're going to test it out in 2 seconds. Let's do this. Let's go to the pop-in script and the sign-out script. No, not you. Sign-out script right here. All right, so what do we need to do when we get a success? So we log them in. If we get a response success, we're going to do this. Should we change the window? Yeah, we'll change the window. We'll do a window.location. I think it should be a reload. And we'll just send in the popup.signout.html. All right, so if they're in this sign-in page, they click the sign-in with their email and password. They get authorized. We get a success. We're just going to flip that page to the sign-out button. That's how we're going to know we're successful. So we're just going to do the opposite for the sign-out page. When they click the sign out and they have the proper credentials, they get signed out, we get a response of success. And we're just going to flip the page to a sign in page. And again, we're going to handle the welcome page in a moment. So let's test this thing. We're going to refresh. Any errors? No errors. All right. I click the on clicker, of course. We need to code for that on click. We'll do that here. So we'll say chrome.browser action.on clicked. We'll put a function. We don't really care what's in there. So we'll need a tree here. We're going to say if, so when we click this this button here, if they're not signed in, so user signed in is false, then we want to show them the sign in page. So we'll do a chrome.windows, is it Windows? I think it's windows.create. And a few options here. We'll do the URL. It's going to be the popup.signin.html. Let me get rid of this thing here. There you go, sign in HTML. We'll do a width of 300. We'll do a height of, this opens up a new window for the user. And we'll do a focused of true. So if they're not signed in, we'll create a window. We'll pop up a window with the sign in page. If not, we'll do a sign out page. So if they're already signed in, then we'll send them the sign out page. So out.html. Save, and this gets a bit more complicated. When we get to the welcome stuff, we'll handle that in a moment. So let's refresh the extension. We click on this, and there's an error. Why is there an error? Chrome browser action on clicked, and that should be, what should that be? On clicked, clear all, it should be add listener. Add listener, there we go. Save, go back, refresh, press the button, there we go. So that email we're expecting was t@yeah.com, and the password is 123. If we successfully sign in, this page will flip to the sign out page. So I sign in, and nothing happened. Why? On the background, resolve success. We might be getting it right here. Oh, here we go. Res is not equal to. This should be res.status up here as well. Res.status. And it shouldn't be reload. It should be replace. That should be replace as well. So I think we're good to go. One last time. Refresh. Give me the pop-up. Give me the pop-ups console. Thank you. Give me the background console. Thank you. t@yeah.com. We get a 1, 2, 3. We sign in. There we go. We get the sign out button. Let's do a sign out. So we should get the sign in page. So click sign in or sign out, excuse me. And we get a error on the background script. Property email of null at flip user status. And that's because we're sending this wrong message here. We want to flip the status to false if you want to sign out. And this user info should be a string, not a variable name. So we're going to refresh, get this guy. We're going to sign in, yeah, 1, 2, 3. We'll sign in, sign out. There we go. So signing in and signing out works perfectly. Watch this. So yeah, 1, 2, 3. We sign in. Let's not sign out. Let's close this. Let's close this. Let's close this. Let's open up the browser again, and we'll see which pop-up we get. So let me go to Chrome extensions in case there are errors there. Get the background page. Now, we're going to code for getting a welcome, but for now, what do we get? We're still signed in, remember. We still have the email and password saved on the local hard drive. We click this, and we get the sign-in page. That's because when we close the browser, we lose access to this variable here, which keeps track of the sign-in state. When we click on the icon, this icon here, after we've closed down the browser, we want to check the local storage for a user status, user info. If there's a true, we're going to send a sign out page. If it's true, we're going to send the welcome page. If it's false, we're going to send the sign in page. So that's where this thing gets a bit more complicated. So let's track the user's session state by here. So if it's a return session, so they've closed their browser, we'll set it to false. And they've opened their browser and they're in the local storage. We'll do this. Let's create a function that checks whether or not the user's there in the local storage. We'll call it function is user signed in, and it's going to return a promise. So we'll just do return new. And the reason why we have to return a promise is because we're going to use that Chrome storage local business. So we're going to need the resolve, and let's just copy some code. Let me close this. We'll copy that get of the user's credentials. This guy right here. Copy that. We'll paste that here. We'll do this. We'll do this. Return the promise. We don't need semicolon. All right. So we get the user status, user info. If there is a chrome.runtime.last error, we're going to resolve with. Now, this promise is going to work in that no matter what happens, it's going to resolve with this. So some sort of, how did I save it on the storage? User status. All right. So no matter what we return from or what happens in the function here, it's going to return a promise that resolves to user status of something, and then user info of something, underscore info of something. Let me comment this. So just because we failed in the get, maybe there was some sort of error with the browser, we're going to still send back an empty credential object. So we're going to resolve with this. We'll do user status and we'll put false, and user info, we'll do an empty object like that. If there's no error, we got something from the local storage. Now, just because we got something from the local storage doesn't mean it's a true or a false. It might be that this thing went off without a hitch, so there's no, the browser didn't break, but there's no true or false. There's no error, or there's no entry yet. So we might get an empty object. So we're going to check for that like this. If the response.userStatus is equal to undefined, which means there's nothing in the object, undefined, undefined. Should we use a ternary? I'll use a ternary for this. So if response user status is equal to undefined, we're still going to return an empty object or a credential object. So we're going to do, and of course, this will be a resolve. Let's do this on a separate line. Let me clear this object. So if it's undefined, it's an empty object, we still want to return something like this. Close that. We don't need this bracket. So user status or credential object. User status will set to false. User info will set to an empty object. Else, we'll return the object of a user status, which will be the response.userStatus, and the user info will be the response.userinfo underscore info. What's going on here? There we go. And a closing bracket. All right, so just to go through what we just did, we've created a function that we can call to check whether or not the user has credentials on the back, not the back end, but the local storage. So return a promise. We query the local storage. If there's some sort of error, we still return an empty credentials object. So user status, user info, nothing. If it went through without a hitch, it might be true, it might be false, it might be a blank object. So we check the user status. If it's undefined, that means it's a blank object. If it's a blank object, we return a blank credential object. If it's not a blank object, it's going to have a true or false in the user status, and it's going to have some sort of user info here. Now that user info might be a blank string or whatever, but it will have some sort of user info. So that's the user signed in. So when we first load up this script, let me write it. Yeah, whatever, write it here. Actually, let's not write it above the functions. So when you first load this extension, it's always going to call is user signed in. We'll do that. So that's a function, that's a listener. Let me move this listener below the functions. Listener, listener, listener. So after the functions are written, we'll do this. Is user signed in. It returns a promise. So we do a dot then. Response. And we know let me just do a catch real quick. We know we're getting some form of a credential object. It might be blank, it might be true, false, it doesn't matter. But we know we're getting something. So console.log the res. So we're going to check if the res.userStatus is equal to true. We don't need that. Like that, we're just going to set the return session variable that we made up here. Set it to true. Is equal to true. And of course, we'll just set the the user signed in to whatever the res.userStatus is, whether it be true or false. So just to go over what we did, we called that user signed in function. It returns a promise. It resolves to some sort of credential object, whether or not it's true or false. If it's true and they've just opened the browser, this thing runs when they just open the browser, we know that they have a record in there, so we turn the return session to true. And then we set the user signed in, which is this variable right here, to true or false based on what their status is. And so right here is where we're going to check whether or not there's a return session, whether or not return session is equal to true. So we can switch this up with this. Let's not check the variable because this might run real quick. So we're going to delete this. We're going to delete this. And we're going to delete this. And we're just going to call this. We're going to say is user signed in dot then. And we get some sort of credential object. Let's do a catch of error. And we'll do console.log the error. All right, so we picked up on the isUserSigned function. It returns the response, which is some sort of credential object. If res.userStatus is equal to true, then we know we have to do this. We have to create the sign out page right here. So we'll take this and we'll put it in here. Now, just because the user status is equal to true doesn't mean we want this sign out page. Because we set the return session, we'll say if return session is equal to true, we'll create a different page, else we'll create this page. And then I'll summarize what we did. So if it is a return session, we don't want to give them the chance to sign out on the sign out page. We want to give them a chance to sign out on the welcome back page. So we just change this to, what's it called, pop-up, welcome back. So pop-up, welcome back. And if the user status is false, we know we want to display the sign in page. So copy all this and point that in there. All right, so what did we do? Well, we took away the testing of whether or not the user signed in from this variable here, because this variable just gets created right away. I don't want any confusion. So we just use the function we just wrote that checks whether or not the user has some sort of entry in the local storage. If they do, well, if they do or don't, doesn't matter. We handle that there. If that if the user status is true, we know either it's a return session or they've still had the session up and they just click the browser icon again. So we check whether or not it's a return session. If it's a return session, we give them back the welcome back. If it's not a return session, so they're still on the page after they've signed in, we just give them the sign out page. If the user status is false, which means they're not signed in at all, and user return session should be, let's do this. So after we create the return session right here, we'll do a function and we'll just do this. We'll do return session. So they've used their return, their one return session. We'll set that to false right there. So if the user status is false, we know we want them to sign in. So we give them the sign in page here. Let's check it. Let's see if this thing works. Refresh, any errors? Perfect. Let's go here. Sign out. Have we coded for the sign out page? Welcome, 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 welcome. Where's the welcome back JS? No, we haven't. Let's copy. It should be the same behavior as this guy. Save that. Welcome back. Let me close some of these guys that we're not using. It's getting confusing. The sign in script is good. Sign out script is good. Welcome back. Paste that. There we go. All right. So same behavior. When we click the sign out button on the welcome page, we'll replace that with the sign in page. So let's refresh this. Close this down. All right. So let's sign in. t@yeah.com 123. We should get replaced with the sign out page. There we go. We sign out. Sign in page. Perfect. Let's sign in again. t@yeah 123. We sign in. Perfect. Let's close down the browser. Now, all the variables are gone in the background.js, but we should still have our record in the local storage. So we open up the Chrome browser again. There we go. And there's no name because we haven't coded for taking it out of the response. So we'll do something like this. We'll go into the background script, the welcome back script. When this guy first loads, this is a click. So this gets executed when we click. When we first load, we want to do something like this. We'll do window.on. What should it be? Should it be add event listener on load? We don't even need to do that. We can call it right away. We'll do this. We'll do chrome.runtime.send message to the backend. The message will be, and that was this last if conditional I talked about way in the beginning, this user status business. So user status, there we go. Nope, we need a function with a response, and we're checking for a success and a payload. So if response is equal to success, then we'll fill in that name on the page. So what are we going to do here? When they get the return status, we'll do a return true to keep the pathway open. And then we'll just do a send response of, and this is going to be a bit tricky because I don't want to send when we send the credentials. So if I did something like this, is user signed in, it sends the user status, the true or false, and the email and the password. We don't want to send the password. So let's do something like this. Let's construct our own object. Or do we need to do that? Yeah, let's do this. Let's go is user signed in. We'll do is user signed in. We get some sort of response. We'll do .then response here. We'll do let me scroll up. catch of an error. We'll do console.log the error. All right, so res. So we got the response from the is user signed in. Let's do a send response of res.user status. This will be the user status. There you go. And the user info will just be the email. So user_info will just be the res.userinfo.email. No password. There you go. Send response. That should be good. And on the front end here, we'll do something like, where did I have it? Welcome back. Should be name, span, ID, name. So we'll do a document.getElementById. We'll get by name. We'll go inner text. That's going to be equal to, what's going to be the response.userinfo, which is going to be the email. Let's check to see if this works. Let's refresh the extension. Extensions. We'll do a refresh. Are we signed in already? Welcome back. Let me try a fresh install or login. 1, 2, 3, excuse me. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, sign in, close. Let's open back up, see what we get. Welcome back, and we're not getting anything. Why is that? Response is equal to success. There's no, let's send a message of actual success here. Let's do message of SUCCS. There we go. We could have easily done this as well if there's just a response is true. Let's just code it for exactly what we want. CSS, that should work. And that should be message. Message is equal to success. Then we'll do all this stuff. All right, so Chrome, not version. Chrome extensions, refresh the extension. There we go, yeah. Now we could do some parsing of the string to take out the @yeah part, but I'll just keep it there for now. So let me just close down the browser, see what happens. Welcome back, yeah. We sign out. Let's sign back in, yeah. We go 1, 2, 3, get me the sign out page. Perfect. Click sign out, go to sign in. Perfect. Let's go back, signing in. 1, 2, 3. We sign in. Let's close. Let's open the browser. We get the welcome back. Let's go sign out. Let's sign in again. So yeah. This is another scenario. So we sign in. Let's just close this, but not close the browser. We should get the sign out page, not the welcome back page. Sign out, perfect. Let's sign out. All right. So that was a long video, but it's I think it's one of the basics of getting a basic email or login system on a Chrome extension based on an email and password. And what's great about it is this part here. So the logic of the Chrome extension is sound. It'll work with any backend and any database. So I didn't code for specifically a MongoDB or an SQL. I made this as general as is possible, so you can use whatever database you want, whatever REST server software you want. We used Express. You can use HTTP, whatever you want. I made this as general as is possible. I'm trying to think if I forgot to show you guys anything, and I don't think I did. So if this helped you at all, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and I will see you guys in the next one.